And now the moment we've all been waiting for. I think you guys know what's coming up next. The Phoenix Empire has been waiting their entire lives for this very moment. The time has come, AC family, for the Great Phoenix Empire, our fire ants, to finally move in their colony, queen, brood, and all into the floating mountains of the Ember Islands, the majestic new kingdom we've made for them. This was going to be epic. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC family. Enjoy. This was going to be an operation and a half. As much as I've been waiting for this major moment to come, I've always dreaded moving day for a massive ant colony into something as intricate and complex as this floating mountains paludarium you guys have called the Ember Islands, especially when emigrating a massive colony of dangerously aggressive and stinging fire ants, like our Phoenix Empire here. Because so many things could go wrong, they could end up finding a point of escape. They might prove incompatible and not thrive in their new environment. And worst of all, the queen could get fatally injured during the transition, which would then mean the colony would die. It was critical that during this move, I spotted the great fire ant queen moving into the setup, so that I could be sure that the most important member of the colony made it safely into the soils and didn't stumble into the waters, only to be eaten by our water beasts or something. But guys, what ended up happening over the past 2 days of this epic move was truly one of the coolest and most unforgettable experiences of my whole life as an ant keeper. And I can't wait for you guys to see what crazy things I was able to film during this moving process. So do keep on watching until the end. Okay, now before we go ahead and move our fire ants in, let's do a quick recap of how we got here. For those of you who may be new to the channel, this massive colony of fire ants, we the AC family, the awesome subscribers of this channel, have named the Phoenix Empire, originated from just a single queen ant with eggs in a test tube. The queen's name is the Ember Empress, and to be honest, I've missed her dearly, because though I know she's still alive and doing her thing laying eggs within the colony, after the colony moved into their first dirt setup many months ago, I have never seen her again since. Though I've tried desperately every single day to spot her among her legion of children, even created video for you guys to help me find her, but to no avail. They hide her so well, and it was hard to judge which section of the setup was her preferred royal hangout. Now, over the past several months, we took good care of this queen and her colony, expanding their setup more and more as they grew, until they formed an intricate fire ant metropolis with an unstoppable and booming population of fire ants within their interconnected network of AC ant farms we called the City of Ashes. But the time eventually came when the colony was getting so big, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 500,000 to 700,000 ants now, that we decided it was time to move them into a massive tank to live in for the rest of their lives. And over the past several weeks, we all put our heads together to design and build this epic Avatar-themed floating mountains paludarium we called the Great Ember Islands. Last week, we stocked the waters with aquatic life to help keep the waters clean for when the ants actually move in. And finally, the great day has come for us to move our beloved fire ants into their new vast and majestic forever home to create epic nests within the floating mountains. Moving day is now. Before moving the ants in, I needed to prepare the territories. If you've never kept fire ants before, it's basically like housing velociraptors, but hundreds of thousands of them. They're escape artists, so I need to apply a barrier. Now, ordinarily, I would use this stuff called Fluon, which is super slippery for ants when dried, and is quite effective as an insect barrier. However, unlike when I used it for my last fire ant colony, the Fire Nation, in their Amazon paludarium, I now have a pet bird, and turns out Fluon fumes are lethal for birds. So I wasn't willing to take that risk, and instead opted to use baby powder mixed with rubbing alcohol. When dried, this barrier will be super slippery for ants. The only problem with this barrier is I will need to be absolutely religious about replacing the barrier every few weeks, because every time an ant slips off it, so too does some of the baby powder particles. So it gradually loses effectiveness over time, and you better believe the fire ants will constantly be on the lookout and checking for weak points in the barrier. There was one point in this setup which was a bit of a concern though. Check it out. Here is one of the mountains which is attached to the glass. It kind of comes pretty close to the top. I saw this point when the entire setup arrived at my place after being built, and I knew it was something I would need to pay attention to. This top ridge comes fairly close to the lip. It's okay because the distance is about 2.5 body lengths of the largest workers, and if I put enough barrier there, the ants shouldn't be able to escape. If it becomes a problem, I can try to chip away at this rock to make it shorter. But again, it was an area I would have to keep a close eye on during the move. Now, speaking of the move, I needed to come up with a good strategy, as the method of immigration into the territories would determine the success or failure of the move. So I couldn't simply have the ants just move in a single mass, like I did with the Fire Nation, since the Fire Nation had an enormous area into which they could move their colony. But because the Ember Islands had suspended and isolated mountains for nesting space, I felt restricting the ants' move into the territories at a single point would be very difficult for the ants, because eventually whatever mountain they moved into would fill up, and I was afraid they'd simply pile up all their babies above ground, which would topple into the water and just all around be bad. So in my mind, I knew I needed to have the ants move in sections at strategic points. Let me show you these points now, and also while we're at it, give you a more intimate grand tour of these great Ember Islands, which I've never actually done yet, just so you guys will have a better idea as to where the ants will be entering the setup and where they'll be living once in. So let's start with this mountain here. This is Mount Neptune. I've decided to name the floating mountains after deities of Roman mythology. Neptune, being the god of water, is appropriate for this mountain because it's attached to the territory's rock waterfall and will always be the most highly hydrated mountain available for the ants to nest in. These waterfalls, by the way, need an official name too, but I'll leave it up to you guys to name it. So leave your name suggestions in the comments for the waterfall, and the AC Senate will choose from your suggestions for all of us to vote on together in a future video. The AC Senate, by the way, are a special team of channel supporters that have special rights, inside information, and perks on this channel. You'll see who the AC Senate members are among you in the comments, as they sport badges with various colors next to their names. Do be sure to greet and honor your AC Senators if you see them in the comments. A simple bow will do. You can click here to learn more about joining the great AC Senate. Next to Mount Neptune and the unnamed waterfalls, we have the great Mount Juno, named after the Queen of the Gods. It's the second largest mountain in the lands. It floats beautifully over the waters and has a lot of space for the ants to nest in. Next to Mount Juno, we have Mount Ceres, named after the Roman goddess of harvest. The smallest of the floating mountains. I don't feel the ants will use this as a main nesting space, but perhaps use it for storage for food. Attached to Mounts Juno and Ceres is the largest of the floating mountains, Mount Jupiter. Majestic and powerful in appearance, there is a lot of potential real estate for the ants to nest in within this mountain. But I needed to be careful with adding soil, as they may be able to build an anthill which could extend up to the top lip and create another area of potential escape. From Mount Zeus, the ants travel down some vines, passing the non-nestable island mountain platform, Mount Mercury, named after the Roman messenger god, and onto the great Mount Venus, named after the goddess of love and beauty. I find Mount Venus to be one of the most beautiful of the floating mountains, as it sits gorgeously over the mist, displayed front and center in the skies of the Ember Islands. Adjacent to Mount Venus, the ants can travel to Mount Minerva, named after the Roman goddess of wisdom, en route to Mount Mars, there in the distance, which again has that problematic location. So I don't think I'll be making Mount Mars inhabitable just yet, until the ants really need to expand and populate Mount Mars. See what I did there? Now, from either Mount Minerva or Mount Mars, the ants can travel to what has to be my favorite floating mountain in the archipelago, Mount Vulcan, named after the Roman god of fire. What's special about this mountain is, of all the mountains, this one has the deepest cavern, which means it will be able to retain moisture the best and allow the ants to dig deeper tunnels. Like a floating volcano, it has a broad crater that is tilted slightly forward, which will allow us to better see the ants' nest entrances. If I had to guess, the fire ants will like this mountain the most. And fitting that the Phoenix Empire will inhabit a place named after the Roman god of fire. Finally, the ants can travel to Mount Pluto, named after the ruler of the underworld, as this mountain is isolated to the darkest, most extreme region of the territories, only accessible by passing through the fiery path from Mount Vulcan. And that, my friends, is the Ember Islands archipelago of floating mountains. What do you think? Which mountain is your favorite? Do you think the ants will like them? I can't wait to see the ants living in the mountains, and it'll be interesting to see how they make use of each space, as they each offer very different moisture, space, and location profiles. Alright, enough talk. Let's fill these mountains with soil and finally move the ants in, shall we? I was careful to fill each mountain up with just the right amount of digging medium. I then added water to moisten the soils of each mountain. And then suddenly, the Ember Islands were ready to finally welcome their new royal inhabitants. This was going to be absolutely crazy. For the move, I needed to separate the Phoenix Empire into parts and move them into the Ember Islands in strategic sections, so to minimize any immigration complications that might arise if I were to instead move them all in one bunch. My plan was to first isolate the biggest portion of the colony, which was Hell's Kitchen, this AC Outworld, from AntsCanada.com. I disconnected the tubes, plugged up the openings, then brought it to the Ember Islands. Because this section was the largest section of the City of Ashes, I decided it was best to have the ants here move into one of the largest mountains of the Ember Islands, Mount Juno. I took a tube, covered it in baby powder so the ants wouldn't be able to climb it, and after that, we were now ready to move our first team of Phoenix Empire ants inside. I was so nervous. AC family, you guys ready? Here goes nothing. I attached the tube to Hell's Kitchen and laid the other end onto the soils of Mount Juno. Ants came pouring out. I felt tingles all over my body, watching our beloved Phoenix Empire rushing out of the tube and spreading outward to explore the territories. The sight was truly magnificent. It didn't take the ants long to find the root system and begin their excited exploration of other mountains. I marveled at watching the ants rejoice as they discovered the refreshing flowing waters of our waterfall, which would become their new source of drinking water. I couldn't believe my eyes, watching the ants explore and chart these vast lands. This new space was multiple times bigger than anything the ants had ever experienced before. I watched in delight as the ants traveled as we planned down the root system connecting the mountains to explore the new lands beyond. This here was Mount Ceres. And here, Mount Zeus. This ant was the first to set tarsi on Mount Venus. and rushed back to the rest of the colony to report her incredible findings. It wasn't long before all the fire ants within Hell's Kitchen had been informed of the new territories, and a blazing blanket of fire ants had covered the immediate area around the tube, their first point of entry on Mount Juno. I was absolutely spellbound by the sight. Look at them! Alright, it was now time to move in the rest of the colony. Next section to move in was the Fire Fortress, the colony's AC ant tower. This was the colony's very first proper ant farm. And look at all those babies! I was pretty sure this ant farm contained more ants and brood now than soil. It's just one massive chamber of ants and brood. They've actually moved out a lot of the soil and have chosen to just stockpile up eggs, larvae, and pupae onto the soil surface. Look at that booming brood chamber. There was definitely a lot of young to move out here. I disconnected the ant tower and took it to the Ember Islands. So my plan was to have all the ants and brood within the ant tower move into Mount Venus, which had approximately the same amount of space. There were already ants exploring Mount Venus, so this was going to be a perfect reconnection. I placed one end of the tube onto Mount Venus and connected it to the Fire Fortress. Done! It didn't take the ants long to wander through the tube and emerge onto Mount Venus, reuniting with fellow Phoenix Empire who were busy raving about these newly discovered lands. Check out Mount Neptune, which the fire ants particularly loved for its moistened soils. The ants had also already made it to Mount Mars and even to the open soils of the Mount Vulcan crater. And one curious ant had wandered as far as Mount Pluto and instantly returned to the colony to let everyone know about it. I made sure at this point to keep a close eye on Mount Mars, as more and more ants stepped onto its rocks. So far it didn't look like the ants were escaping, and again, there were no soils on Mount Mars, so I wasn't too concerned, especially because the ants seemed extra enamored with this part of the territories. AC family, you'll love this! Check this out! Below the floating mountains, I suddenly spotted droves of ants forming mind-blowing highways winding through the rough landscape of the rock shelf. Check out their intricate trailing patterns, guys! What a magnificent sight, watching them trail through the misty lands. Where they were trailing to, I wasn't quite sure, but it was still pretty darn cool. What was also pretty cool was the ants had discovered our land bridge leading to the waterfall, which were now being visited by water porters, who would drink from the waterfall and carry all that valuable water within their social stomachs to provide to the rest of the colony. An immigration of this proportion requires lots of water. By now, the ants had formed key trails to all locations of the territories, traveling through the root systems to begin the digging process for nesting within the various floating mountains available to them. I loved watching them travel to and from the great floating mountains. Can you imagine being one of these ants? Imagine how thrilled they all are right now. And indeed, looking closer at the mass of ants, I spotted workers that had already begun to dig tunnels for nesting. A few ants had slipped and fallen into the waters, but I wasn't worried as fire ants are buoyant and can swim. They're built for life around water in floods. Our water beasts didn't seem very interested in them either. Alright, it was now time to move the rest of the colony in. Here are the magma chambers, the colony's AC hybrid nest, which as usual was filled with brood and ants. I disconnected it from the setup and took it to the Ember Islands to emigrate its inhabitants. I decided to move these ants onto Mount Minerva. And of course, masses of fire ants came pouring out of the tube immediately. I opened the Maze of Flames, the last and final section of the City of Ashes, which the ants took so long to move into at first. But wow, now look at them! The ants have totally filled this space up like crazy. Brood rooms upon brood rooms upon brood rooms upon brood rooms. It was crazy to see how the ants have made this space their own. A large portion of the Maze of Flames had soils moved out from the fire fortress, which I assume the ants were using as a garbage site to bury their trash. I took it to the Ember Islands so the last section of the Phoenix Empire could reunite with the rest of the colony and emigrate into their new territories. I decided this final section of the colony would be emigrating into the deep soils of Mount Vulcan. As for the remaining tubes, and test tube portal, I placed them onto the rock shelf for now to allow the ants within them to evacuate and rejoin the colony. And all was complete. The final sections of the City of Ashes had been situated above the Ember Islands, and now all that was left to do was wait. I didn't know how long the moving process would take, but I knew it wasn't going to be quick. Now the waiting game was to begin, a long dragged out process to find the Queen Ant and make sure she would move out of the City of Ashes and safely into the soils of the floating mountains of the Ember Islands. I wasn't sure when she'd be moving out, which tube she'd be coming out of, or if I'd even be able to spot her again. I crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. But little did I know what was about to happen from here on in was an experience I'd never forget. AC family, did you enjoy today's episode? Be sure to tune in next week to see if we manage to spot our Ember Empress, the royal queen ant of the colony, moving out into the Ember Islands. Don't miss the continuation of this story, so if you haven't yet, do smash that subscribe button and bell icon now and hit all so you get notified at every upload. Also, don't forget to hit the like button every single time, including now. It would really mean a lot to me, guys. Thank you. AC in our colony, I have left a hidden cookie for you here if you would like to see extended play footage of our Phoenix Empire moving into the Ember Islands. And guys, did you know that it's anting season in the Northern Hemisphere? And you don't even need to leave your home to start an ant colony. You can catch pregnant queen ants from the safety of your own backyard, balcony, or open window starting this month. Be sure to visit AntsCanada.com for all your ant keeping and collecting gear shipped to you in a special package from our ant-loving facility in the USA, so you can get the most out of your ant keeping experience. We ship worldwide and also offer full email support if you need our help. We also have a helpful forum and ant colony trading marketplace on the site. Visit AntsCanada.com today. And now it's time for the AC question of the week. Last week we asked, which of today's aquatic creatures is your favorite and why? Congratulations to Mindkiller, who answered, my favorite was the betta fighting fish because he's so colorful and you could just watch him for hours. Congratulations, Mindkiller, you just won a free Ultimate Ant Keeping Handbook from our shop. In this week's AC question of the week, we ask, which floating mountain in the Ember Islands is your favorite and why? Leave your answer in the comment section and you could also win a free Ultimate Ant Keeping Handbook from our shop. Hope you can subscribe to the channel as we upload every Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video to help us keep making more. It's Ant Love forever.